Did I say tekrar?
Ben tekrar dedim mi? Kaldır ayağını.
Bir. İki. Üç.
So I don't know if you can hear it, but the wind's really rushing. You probably can. But I'm sitting in this gazebo in the corner of, like, I'm in the mountains, obviously. You can see behind me it's snowing. And it's not super cold, but it's snowing. And it's really beautiful and serene up here. It kind of reminds me of like I don't know, there's like this light green moss over here that, I don't know, kind of reminds me of like a Japanese forest. Although I've never been to Japan, but I feel like in movies and pictures, that's what this strikes me as. But so the culture here it's interesting. Obviously there's not like that much, like people are people and places are places and food is food, but just some of the customs are interesting. Like I drink tea every day, which is great. Turkish coffee is great. It's super strong. They make it by just super finely grinding the beans, and they boil it in with the coffee, and then they just dump it into your cup. So there's like a layer of the coffee sediment at the bottom that obviously you don't drink, but then you turn the cup upside down, and then you're supposed to look at it, and it like tells you your future, was what my translator Faiza was saying. But I've enjoyed the tea. I've enjoyed the coffee. I've enjoyed the scenery, which is great. I've even kind of enjoyed the snow because like yesterday it was snowing. It was like 45 degrees. It was really strange, and it snowed a little bit today while we did our sessions. But the interesting thing about the baseball culture is that they're just starting from scratch. So I knew that coming in, but it's interesting to put yourself in the shoes of a person who just doesn't have much exposure to baseball. Obviously, like in the U.S., and that's kind of what they've remarked to me. They're like, "Oh, you're from America, the mecca of baseball," which is true. There's so many resources. There's so many former players. There's so many coaches. There's so many organizations. There's so much to teach you the game in the United States and in many other countries too. But in Turkey, which is also the case in many other countries that don't really play baseball or just getting into it, they just don't have former players to teach their young players. They don't have former really high-level coaches. They don't have manuals and tons of videos and resources and weekly clinics. If you think about all the baseball stuff that's going on in the U.S., like it's everywhere. I mean, that's the same for every sport, but here they can't find a baseball person to ask a situational question, which is a really interesting thing to think about, which you probably never considered in the U.S. before. But just now I was watching the Turkish National Women's Rugby Team is here, and we've like become friends with them, and one of their girls speaks pretty good English, and we were watching the Estonia-Turkey rugby match, the men's match on TV, and I was watching, I'm like, I don't have any idea what's going on. I don't know one rule of rugby, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of how this feels for a lot of these players who are just starting out, trying to learn baseball, but they just don't know, and they don't have anyone to tell them. And around me, everyone speaks a different language, so they can't tell me how rugby works. And that's essentially the whole thing that we're doing here, is trying to help this country get off the ground and learn baseball, which is hard because it's a super nuanced game. Baseball is really simple, and it's also incredibly complex. It's probably not that simple actually, but all this high-level situational stuff, there's just so much that you would know or you wouldn't know if you're just watching baseball, which for all the parents out there, we know there's tons of parents who really know the game. There's tons of parents who don't know the game. And then there's tons of parents who don't know the game but think they know the game. And then there's lots of people who watch the game and they know that there's a lot they just probably wouldn't be privy to. And each level I played at over the years, I learned new stuff that I just didn't know was going on, and I would have never picked it up unless I was in the game at a really high level, watching it and experiencing it happen. So the higher you play, the more these nuanced, quirky, situational things and high-level concepts you come across. And I just thought about, if I didn't really know rugby and I just watched rugby matches all day, would I ever really pick up on the really high-level things that some of these really good players do that make them good players versus average players? I probably never would. And the same thing is with baseball. If you say you watch every major league game every day, but no one could explain some of the really high-level things that players are doing, you'd never know that they existed. It's just little stuff that you wouldn't pick up on. So here we are in a place where they don't have these high-level players to fall back on. They don't have someone like me, or the people that were mentors to me that I asked questions to and I was in situations with, that they explained, hey, this is what you do here. You don't do what you just did. This is how you do it. And you go, oh, there's no one like that here to do that. So it's really interesting, starting with the basics and just kind of picking up their ability level, because they're really great people here, and I guess I have to stop saying the word super so much. Good Lord. They're really nice people. They're incredibly eager to learn. Like, we did a 3-hour session today, did tons of throwing drills, did tons of pitching drills, did infield footwork, outfield footwork, and they did awesome. They just did really, really well. They were incredibly focused. They listened. They were very coachable. They want to learn, which is fantastic. So that doesn't hold them back whatsoever. But they need continued repetition. They need some way to continue with all this stuff after I'm gone, after the next guy who comes in and does clinics is gone. It's really tough thinking about it from like a business perspective. Like, how could we continue them to help them get better over time? And how can they continue to progress after the in-person people like myself, go back to their country or leave or whatever? So in-person clinics are great, but without all the other people, like in any other country where there's tons of high-level players who will be there to continue to be that fallback of instruction, how can they continue to get better? So YouTube is their big resource, because they can just hit the captions button. It'll convert it into Turkish on the captions, which is great. But beyond that, there's just not a whole lot. I gave them one of my books as a gift, and it's in English. So they could translate it, which they said they're going to, but even then, that's just the challenge that they face. So it's really interesting, and it's exciting to work with them because they're so passionate about baseball. I mean, these kids love baseball the same as American kids do. They just haven't had as much high-level instruction. They haven't had the same developmental experience as others. So, like I said, the eagerness is there. They're just still figuring all this stuff out, which is cool. So, every person starts somewhere. Every country with a new sport starts somewhere. Japan didn't have baseball. At some point, I don't know the history of their game, but obviously Japan's incredible at baseball now, and that took a lot of years, and that culture developed where they created some good players, and the good players came back to help the next generation, and then over time the legacy was built. So that's, I think, the really challenging part is getting a legacy of the sport built, where there's a continual feeder system of players who come and go, and the older ones come back and nurture the next ones along. And that's definitely going to take some time, but hopefully they can get going, because, like I said, they're really, really eager and excited about it, and that's cool as an instructor. So that's the day. I don't know what day it is. Apparently it's Saturday. I lost 8 hours. I don't know if I'll ever get it back, but tomorrow's Easter. I'm extremely cold now. It's snowing harder, and we have an indoor clinic for an hour later today. So I'm starting to shiver. You can probably hear my voice. But that's the day 4 or 5 update with the time zones and our schedule here. No one celebrates Easter in this country really, so there's nothing going on for it. The days are kind of blurring together, so we're trying to figure out this morning what day it was. But so today we have clinic. Tomorrow we'll have more clinics, and the weather's going to warm back up. This snow is not normal, they said. It's just how it is. But anyway, that's day 4 and 5, maybe day 6, I don't know, of the Turkey trip, and getting off the ground with the players, which is good, and go from there. But I'm going to get a bunch of video of the food and a lot of different things from the scenery here, and share that on the next update.
Say hello to whoever watches my YouTube channel. Say merhaba.
Merhaba YouTube.